everyone, it's me again. I'm Lena and I'm from the Healthcare Landscape group. In this video, I'll be talking about my main video, which is about the 5 senses. Now, this video is just going to be an introduction of what are the 5 senses, and I'll be talking about their main parts. The first part is what are the 5 senses, the second part is the components of each of the 5 senses, and lastly, I'm going to talk about how do they work together. So let's get started with our first part, which is what are the 5 senses? Well, there are 5 basic senses, and I think that all of you know by now what the 5 senses are. It is hearing, tasting, smelling, seeing, and touching. So those are the 5 senses. It allows us to understand and interact with the world around us. For example, when eating a meal, we can use all of our 5 senses. For example, we see the food's appearance, then we smell its aroma, and then we hear the sound of us cutting or chewing it, and then we taste its flavor and feel its texture. So that is an example of how the 5 senses work together in a common everyday life example. Next is the components of the 5 senses. Well, there are 5 main senses and there are 5 main organs. The first one is taste. Well, we taste with our tongue, and in our tongue there are little taste buds in our tongue that helps us to feel that flavor. There's also hearing, which we hear with our ears, and we actually hear with our outer ear, not our inner ear. The sight, for sight, we use our eyes to interpret that image, and for touch, we use our skin, which is the biggest organ in the whole body. And lastly, smell is we use the nose, which works together with the mouth to interpret and make the perception of flavors. Now, all of these are processed through the brain. And here you can see there are other terms for the 5 senses. Sometimes you might hear hearing as audition, or sight as vision, smell as olfactory, taste as gustation, and finally touch as somatosensory perception. So somatosensory perception is for touch. Those are some other terms of the 5 senses. And lastly, how do they work together? How do the sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste, what are the processes? And how do we interpret that and use that in the example like this? For the sight, firstly, the eyes will see and detect light or color. The next step is to convert that image, that light and color into signals. Then those signals are sent to the brain, which the brain interprets as visual images. The next one is hearing. Well, hearing, our ears, we use our ears to hear. Well, our ears funnel sound, our outer ears funnel sound as waves, and they funnel sound waves, and also those sound waves are turned into electrical signals in the inner ear. Then those sound waves are sent into signals in the ear. Then those signals are sent to the brain again to interpret that signals as sound. And lastly, touch. And the next one is touch. Receptors in the skin, there are receptors all over our skin, but the most sensitive is in our hand. There's a test where you can put one finger on your hand and you can feel how many fingers are on your hand. But if you take that finger and put it on your leg, that will be different on your thigh. You can't really feel how many fingers are on there. So that is the touch. These receptors in the skin senses temperature, pressure, and also pain. Those signals are sent to the brain via some nerves in our body, which is the nervous system. There are plenty of nerves in our body, and it's related and is in the nervous system. And lastly, we can feel texture, heat, and other physical sensations because the brain interprets those signals as heat, texture, and other physical sensations. So yeah, that is basically for the touch. How about the smell? Well, olfactory is smell. Olfactory receptors or smell receptors in our nose detect chemicals in the air, and those olfactory receptors can identify various odors. And I've said this in the beginning of the video, which is that smell heavily influences how flavor is interpreted and how flavor is perceived. And lastly, the last sense is taste. Taste buds have 5 main tastes. So taste buds sense 5 main tastes. There's sour, there's bitter, there's sweet, there's salty, and umami. Sometimes there's also spicy, but it's not in the 5 main basic tastes. Taste and smell work together to create the perception of flavor. So that is basically how do they work together. Now on the board here, I have a picture of the different parts of the brain and how they are related to the 5 senses. Now, as you can see, all of this are set to the brain to interpret it as either sound, as image, as smell, as odor, things like that. And so for the concentration and planning and problem solving, it's in the frontal lobe. Smell is also in the frontal lobe. Taste and touch and pressure are in the parietal lobe. There's the occipital lobe, which we have vision, and the cerebellum is coordination. As for the temporal lobe, we have hearing and facial recognition. So those are the areas of the brain where the 5 senses are interpreted and then sent back the signals to the organs to see and to make them do what movement the brain tells them to do. For example, my ears sense a dog coming towards me. My eyes immediately goes to that dog and see what that dog is doing. Then I see that that dog is going to jump at me, so the brain senses that the sense of touch, I need to push my hand out, and then I feel the dog's fur, and that is basically another example of how the 5 senses work together. To end this video, I have 2 main fun facts I want to share to you. The first one is humans have around 10,000 taste buds in our tongue alone, and it is replaced every 2 weeks. The next one is the eye can recognize as many as 10 million different colors. So a normal eye can sense about 10 million different colors. We basically can see the world in a lot of different shades. There's light blue, there's dark blue, there's many kinds of blue. And so the eye can recognize 10 million colors. So that is basically the 2 main fun facts that I have for today, and that wraps up the end of my main video. I hope that you learned something new from this video or just review some of the things that you have learned. Thank you again for listening to my video, and hope to see you soon. Goodbye!